I woke up on the floor of my taxi, holding a half-eaten burrito and a parking ticket dated 3 years into the future. That was my first sign that today would be weird. My horn was already honking by itself, the windshield wipers were doing the Macarena, and there was a suspicious squirrel staring at me from the dashboard. I didn't question it. I just buckled up, turned the key, and whispered to my taxi, "Let us cause problems." First customer flagged me down with a giant inflatable flamingo. He climbed in, soaking wet, wearing snorkel gear, and said, "To the DMV, and step on it?" I nodded like this was normal. We didn't take the road, though. We went through a children's petting zoo, launched off a haystack, bounced over a bouncy castle, and landed in a parking lot full of angry nuns. The flamingo guy gave me 5 stars and a fish taco. Next rider was an old lady with a parrot on one shoulder and a chainsaw in her lap. "Don't ask questions," she growled, "just drive like the government's watching." I did exactly that. We barreled through 3 red lights, got chased by a police drone, and somehow ended up driving through a furniture store. She bought a recliner mid-chase. "It's for emergencies," she explained, then jumped out while still moving and vanished in a puff of glitter. I barely had time to blink before a mime slid silently into the back seat. I asked him where to go, and he just started pointing wildly like a confused traffic cop. I took a left, he screamed silently. I took a right, he smiled. We ended up at a drive-through sushi place that doesn't exist on the map. He paid me in invisible money, gave me a fake flower, and disappeared like he was never real to begin with. I questioned my entire existence. Then a guy in a wizard robe jumped in, waving a glow stick like a wand. "To the rave forest," he shouted. "The mushrooms are whispering again." So naturally, I turned on my hazard lights, activated turbo mode, and blasted techno music loud enough to shake nearby squirrels out of trees. We hit a bump and entered what I can only describe as a portal of sparkles and regret. The trees were dancing. The mushrooms were actually whispering. One of them asked me if I had any gum. The wizard tipped me in fairy dust and said, "Don't trust owls wearing monocles." Next ride was a kangaroo. I don't mean a guy in a costume. I mean a real-life kangaroo with a fanny pack. It hopped into the front seat, opened Google Maps, and typed in juice bar. I followed its directions through 5 back alleys, a skate park, and briefly onto a roller coaster. At the juice bar, it paid in Australian coins and gave me a thumbs up with its little paw. I think I'm friends with the kangaroo now. The shift was only getting weirder. A group of goth teens got in next. They were dressed entirely in black and requested to be driven to a graveyard for a photo shoot and emotional bonding. I played only sad violin music while taking them through shortcuts including a swamp, a haunted car wash, and a tunnel filled with raccoons wearing party hats. At the cemetery, one of them proposed to a tombstone. I slowly backed away. Then came the business llama. No one talks about the business llama. He wore a tie. He sat silently in the back seat, stared into my soul through the rearview mirror, and passed me a note that said, "To the stock exchange." I nodded, feeling intimidated by his professional aura. On the way, we had to dodge a protest made entirely of people dressed as garden gnomes. I hit one by accident, but he bounced. The llama tipped me with a briefcase full of hay and disappeared into the revolving doors of the financial district. A break-dancing octopus entered next. I should mention that this taxi simulator takes place nowhere near the ocean. Still, he flopped into the back, tossed me a cassette tape labeled Funky Beats Volume 7, and requested the skate park.
Is this the
I hit play. Suddenly the taxi was bouncing to the beat. Wheels spinning, hubcaps flying, even the gear shift was vibing. We arrived mid-spin, and the octopus flopped out, moonwalked into a crowd, and was immediately crowned king of the skate jam. I now fear marine life. Things slowed down briefly with my next fare, a dentist who moonlights as a yodeling instructor. He said, "I'm late for my mountain yodel off." I nodded, as if this wasn't he, completely unhinged, and headed for the hills. Halfway there, we passed a go-kart gang that challenged us to a race. The dentist accepted without my consent. We raced through tunnels, over construction zones, and through a billboard that said this is not a shortcut. We won. The dentist yodeled in celebration, causing a nearby moose to faint. He paid me in toothpaste samples. Then came the intergalactic pizza delivery robot. It had malfunctioned and thought I was its mothership.
This city is so pretty.
I accepted the role with honor. It directed me through a series of bizarre coordinates that led to an abandoned bowling alley filled with feral cats. It beeped in satisfaction, delivered a glowing pizza to a man who looked like he hadn't blinked in 3 weeks, and returned to the cab. Before leaving, it plugged a USB into my dashboard and downloaded a mixtape labeled Songs for Robots in Existential Crisis. I still listen to it. At some point, a foghorn went off in the glove box. A pirate climbed in, tossed a parrot on the gear stick, and shouted, "Take me to the treasure or I'll turn ya into boot polish." Naturally, I swerved onto a beach road and followed an old treasure map he drew in ketchup. We crashed through beach volleyball games, dodged jet skis, and skidded to a halt near a lifeguard tower. He leapt out, screamed "X marks the parking spot," and disappeared under the sand. I don't ask questions anymore. My final fare of the day, a grandma who turned out to be an elite stunt driver. "I used to drift before it was cool," she said, pulling out her own racing gloves. She climbed into the driver's seat, kicked me into the passenger side, and launched us into a series of turns so intense I lost feeling in my teeth. We drifted through 3 donut shops and a bowling alley. She parked perfectly between 2 moving trucks and got out like she'd just been to the grocery store. I gave her 5 stars, an energy drink, and my eternal respect. And just when I thought it was safe to rest, the taxi itself began talking. "You have reached enlightenment," it said. "You are now one with the chaos." I nodded. The horn honked once in approval. A squirrel threw me a high five. The sun set in reverse. A man in a tuxedo ran by being chased by ducks. It was just another Tuesday in Taxi Simulator. I started my shift by kicking the taxi door open like a cowboy entering a saloon, except the only thing waiting for me was a pigeon sitting on my steering wheel, wearing sunglasses, and chewing a receipt. I didn't ask. I just nodded, turned the ignition, and began what I assumed would be a normal day of responsible taxi driving and definitely not being chased through traffic by an angry clown with a pogo stick. First passenger, a man in a banana costume who said, "Drive like you're trying to escape a fruit salad," and that's exactly what I did. We plowed through a farmer's market, a parking lot filled with nothing but tricycles, and somehow ended up on a yacht that was being towed by a monster truck. He jumped out mid-air, tossed me a handful of jelly beans, and screamed, "Viva la potassium!" I didn't have time to process that before a pair of identical twins wearing opposite-colored tuxedos climbed in and told me to follow the trail of hot dogs. I didn't see any hot dogs at first, but then I realized they meant the scent. So, I turned off GPS and followed my nose through a parade, past a mime wrestling a unicycle, and straight into an underground tunnel shaped like a giant worm. At the end of the tunnel, a man in a chef's hat gave me a gold star and a sausage. One of the twins winked and said, "You'll understand in 20 minutes." I still don't. Next passenger was a grandma with night vision goggles and a chicken on a leash. She said, "Drive to the secret knitting club. If anyone follows us, pretend you're delivering pizza to the moon." So I took us through alleyways, parking garages, and even a brief detour through an abandoned trampoline park filled with fog and one confused marching band. We arrived at a bakery with no door and she vanished behind a rotating wall of cinnamon rolls. I blinked and saw the chicken give me a salute before following her. My taxi smelled like yarn and poultry for the rest of the day. After that, I picked up a street magician who insisted on sitting in the trunk. He yelled directions through a rubber hose that led to the cup holder. We ended up on a racetrack for shopping carts, dodging rogue trolleys and a guy riding a Segway while playing a trombone. When we reached our destination, a discount fireworks warehouse, the magician disappeared in a puff of glitter, and I found a live duck wearing a party hat in his place. It wouldn't stop quacking the Macarena. Things only got stranger. A professor with wild hair and 6 wristwatches jumped in next. He shouted, "Time is of the essence. And also meaningless." He gave me a device that looked like a blender fused with a doorbell and told me to drive until the sun looked confused. So we did loops around a roundabout until time started moving backwards and I saw myself waving from the future. The professor threw a watermelon out the window, screamed, "It was the only way," and vanished into thin air, leaving only a half-written essay on the ethics of socks. Then a bachelorette party piled in 7 women in unicorn onesies holding flamingo balloons and chanting "Taxi Rodeo." I don't know why, but I instinctively turned on country music and started drifting through traffic